Israeli and Palestinian leaders are meeting in Washington today for their first direct talks in nearly 2 years. President Obama kicked off the negotiations on Wednesday with a day of preparatory meetings also involving Jordan and Egypt. Speaking from the Rose Garden, Obama said the U.S. intends to resolve all of the issues in the way of a peace deal.
These negotiations are intended to resolve all final status issues. The goal is a settlement negotiated between the parties that ends the occupation, which began in 1967, and results in the emergence of an independent, democratic, and viable Palestinian state, living side by side in peace and security with a Jewish state of Israel and its other neighbors. That's the vision we are pursuing.
The talks are taking place because the U.S. successfully pressured Palestinian leaders to drop their precondition of an Israeli settlement freeze. In advance of the talks, the Obama administration also rejected a Palestinian request for the U.S. to present a peace plan of its own, as President Bill Clinton did just before leaving office. Nabil Shath of the Palestinian Authority said President Obama has vowed to pressure Israel on settlement construction.
He expressed his big interest, and that of his administration, to reach a solution that would lead to an independent Palestinian state that encompasses all the goals and ambition of the Palestinian people, and that this goal must be achieved now. He also stressed that this is in America's interest, not just in Palestinian, Arab, or Israeli interest. And he stressed that he would do all he can to reach an agreement within a year, and that he will do all he can to stop the settlements. That was his principal message.
Also Wednesday, Palestinian militants shot and wounded 2 Israeli settlers as they drove in the occupied West Bank. The shootings come one day after militants killed 4 Israeli settlers in the West Bank town of Hebron. The military wing of the Palestinian group Hamas has claimed responsibility for both attacks. Vice President Joe Biden and top U.S. military officials marked the nominal end of U.S. combat operations in Iraq with a formal change of command ceremony in Baghdad. In what's been described as a made-for-television event, Biden said the U.S. is on track to withdraw all its troops by the end of next year.
The United States has now ended our combat mission in Iraq, and Iraqi troops are taking lead responsibility for their country's security. We've kept a promise made to the American people and to the people of Iraq by drawing down our forces to roughly 50,000. And we're on track to remove all of our troops by the end of next year, according to the agreement signed by President Bush, made with the Iraqi government.
Tens of thousands of U.S. troops, special operations forces, and private contractors remain in Iraq. According to the New York Times, the commander of one of the remaining U.S. brigades, Colonel Malcolm Frost, recently wrote to his soldiers' families, quote, "We will move around Iraq fully protected in armored strikers and other armored vehicles, wearing full-body armor and fully loaded with ammunition to deal with the enemy if and when they raise their head in anger against us." In Pakistan, over 60 people have been killed in a series of airstrikes on 3 villages in the tribal region of Khyber. Pakistani officials say over 30 suspected militants were slain in the attack. But witnesses say the dead include at least 9 civilians, 3 of them children. The Justice Department has charged the head of the Pakistani Taliban, Hakimullah Mehsud, with plotting the attack that killed 7 CIA employees in Afghanistan last December. The charges come about 8 months after the Obama administration claimed it was 90% certain Mehsud had died in a CIA drone strike. At the State Department, Coordinator for Counterterrorism Daniel Benjamin announced the Pakistani Taliban has been added to the U.S. government list of designated foreign terrorist organizations.
The TTP is very much part of the most dangerous terrorist threat that the United States faces. The TTP and al-Qaeda have a symbiotic relationship. TTP draws ideological guidance from al-Qaeda, while al-Qaeda relies on the TTP for safe haven in the Pashtun areas along the Afghan-Pakistani border. This mutual cooperation gives TTP access to both al-Qaeda's global terrorist network and the operational experience of its members. Given the proximity of the 2 groups and the nature of their relationship, TTP is a force multiplier for al-Qaeda.
The United Nations has disclosed more people may have been victimized in recent mass rapes in the Democratic Republic of Congo than previously thought. The UN now says some 240 women, girls, and babies may have been raped when Rwandan and Congolese rebels stormed the town of Luvungi, up from previous estimates of 150. It took 3 weeks for the UN to respond, even though the town is just miles from a UN base. Evacuation orders have been issued for 2 islands in North Carolina's Outer Banks as Hurricane Earl approaches the East Coast. Federal officials say Earl has strengthened into a Category 4 storm. North Carolina Governor Beth Perdue has declared a state of emergency. A hostage-taking at the Maryland headquarters of the television network Discovery Channel ended Wednesday with the fatal shooting of the suspect. Police say James Lee had entered the building armed with a handgun and possibly wearing explosives. Lee was described as a mentally unstable environmentalist who had long railed against Discovery's coverage of environmental issues. A federal judge has rejected the Obama administration's attempts to dismiss an energy industry lawsuit challenging the 6-month ban on deepwater oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. The White House reimposed the ban in July after the same judge struck it down the month before. The judge, Martin Feldman, has extensive energy industry financial ties. On Wednesday, Feldman ruled the suit can't proceed because the new moratorium doesn't differ in substance from the first. New figures, meanwhile, show BP has spent more than $93 million on advertising in the over 4 months since the oil disaster began. That amounts to $5 million per week and over 3 times BP's ad spending during the same span in 2009. New figures show the number of undocumented immigrants entering the United States has declined by almost 2/3 in the past decade. According to the Pew Hispanic Center, the number fell by more than half to 300,000 after the recession hit in 2007. Overall, an estimated 11.1 million undocumented immigrants lived in the United States last year, an 8% decrease from its peak of 12 million in 2007. Residents of a Wyoming town where natural gas drilling has occurred for years are now being warned their water is not only undrinkable, but potentially explosive. The Environmental Protection Agency issued the warning after a second round of testing on the town of Pavilion's water supply. The first round found at least 3 water wells contained chemicals used in the natural gas drilling process of hydraulic fracturing. ProPublica reports the latest tests confirmed the presence of those chemicals as well as benzene, metals, naphthalene, phenols, and methane. In addition to being told not to drink their water, Pavilion residents are also being advised to use fans and ventilation when showering or washing clothes to avoid the risk of explosions. Sweden's top prosecutor has reopened a rape investigation against the co-founder of the website WikiLeaks, despite dropping the same case last month. The probe of Julian Assange comes less than 2 months after his group released thousands of classified U.S. government documents on the Afghan war. In a television interview, Assange again denied the allegations and said he's the target of a smear campaign.
In a system that has rule of law, the police should have the burden to prove their case. However, we can see here that what is happening is not happening inside a court of law. It is happening in the jury of public opinion because of deliberate attempts to push this into the public opinion, starting from the very beginning and including either major errors or outright complicity by the prosecution.
And the Washington Post, meanwhile, is reporting the jailed soldier accused of leaking the Afghan war documents, Bradley Manning, faced scrutiny over his mental health late last year. According to Manning's attorney, a superior disabled Manning's weapon after becoming concerned about his behavior. Despite the claim, the superior also admitted he didn't refer Manning for any mental health treatment and continued to let him work in his post as an intelligence analyst with access to classified material. The attorney also says Manning is currently receiving treatment, including a regimen of prescription drugs for depression and insomnia. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Juan Gonzalez.